Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Clements here from blessed Ubud, Bali at the Uada studios. Today, February 27th, 2024, decided to change and integrate the topic somewhat, a tribute to Burma, a tribute to Myanmar, the peoples, the Dhamma, and the revolution, and why Myanmar, why Burma is important to me. And I think if you understand it more, perhaps it'll be very relevant and important to you as well. I may start here at the very beginning that my colleague and I, Fergus Harlow, along with a number of other people, are launching a global campaign set to launch on March 4th of this year, titled the Global Use Your Freedom Campaign, useyourfreedom.org. And may I invite you to invite your friends to share everywhere that domain name, useyourfreedom.org. It'll be up soon. We have a beautiful 2-minute, tragically inspiring video. And we have a number of items on this website, call to action. And we are also giving away freely our latest book, The Voice of Hope, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison, and a letter to a dictator. This book was recently read by the esteemed statesman from the UK, Derek Tonkin, who was the former ambassador to Thailand and to Laos. He read the book, unbeknownst to Fergus and I, and was so deeply moved by the content, primarily in the words of the imprisoned Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, which the campaign is dedicated to, along with the President Win Myint and the 20,000 other unlawfully imprisoned prisoners of conscience in Burma. Presently, I would say an attempted genocide of democracy by the military dictator Min Laing. And he read this book, and he was so moved by the content and that it refuted the legacy media-driven, along with many of the leaders of the world, celebrities included and influencers and artists, of the bogus narrative of Aung San Suu Kyi's so-called silence regarding the Rohingya crisis in Rakhine State in Burma, where the tragic violence took place, instigated, I might add, by the Arakan Revolutionary Salvation Army, the acronym ARSA, A-R-S-A, a terrorist organization that has clearly been traced to funding from many of bin Laden's primary funders in Karachi, where the leaders are from, not to vilify Pakistan, but just to trace ARSA's roots. And their unbridled October 7th attack on 30 military installations in the Rakhine State that prompted Burma's military army to retaliate, and subsequently a massive exodus of people from Burma, the Rohingya, into Bangladesh. The country today, after a coup d'etat in February 21, is beyond language the level of destruction and despair and trauma. And in that, the people of the country, 132 different ethnicities and different languages and dialects have risen up in radical solidarity with, I would call it, moral courage and timeless principles of compassion, of loving kindness, of caring, of dedicating their well-being, their lives, to the freedom of others, as if their freedom and others were inseparable. And they call this struggle for freedom in Burma a revolution of the spirit. And so this campaign, useyourfreedom.org, is meant to correct the misperceptions which my colleague Fergus and I, in our book, many years of deep investigative journalism and research, along with, after my unbanning from Burma in 2012, traveling extensively throughout the country, doing hundreds of interviews. And this book is the result of those interviews and my on-the-ground research and Fergus's own in-depth research of researching Aung San Suu Kyi's talks, press conferences, media appearances, along with her public talks within the country, including all the various ethnic areas of the country, Karen State, Shan State, Mon State, and so on and so forth, and translating those. And we brought forth in this book a 150-page interview with her, addressing all the key points of her country's struggle for freedom and democracy, as well as the narrative that was perpetuated by legacy media and a lot of people in the world falsely, that she was silent in the Rohingya crisis. If anything, she was very outspoken. If you read the book, which we're going to give away for free, you'll see how she, in her own words, completely debunks the narrative. And as a result of this collectively throwing her and the people under the bus, no fear and blame intended here, that's the way in which things work a lot of the times, Burma now is back in the news. The campaign is about to launch, based upon Derek Tompkin, the former ambassador to Laos and Thailand, giving the book to the universal jurisdiction, the world courts in Argentina, and I think also in Germany, where it's being received by the judges as evidence contrary to so-called Aung San Suu Kyi's complicity with the evil regime in Burma. Yes. You cannot say much good about them. And here we are today in February, March, April 2024, where the narrative is changing. And so why is Burma important? And I dare say, with the incredible loss of life and horror that's gone down in more recent years in Ukraine, with Russia, and just, how could one even talk about this collective violence in the name of what's gone down in Palestine and Gaza and in Israel, in the Middle East, what's gone down for decades in Burma, what's gone down in my own country of America, with the false narrative of invading Iraq. Yes, Saddam has his problems, but to kill 1 million civilians in the name of a lie that's been proven, the $7 trillion that was demanded of us as American citizens to pay our taxes, to support the war industry, the pathological, evil war industry that profits on the weaponization of Ukraine, the weaponization of Netanyahu's defense ministry, the weaponization of other countries in the world, and the tolerance that we have as human beings for genocide in our mind, in our conscience, in our dignity, in our face. of violence, of rape, of persecution, of mass starvation, of famine, of disease, of no water, no bathing water, no drinking water, no pillow, no mosquito net, no medicines, no hand to hold you. How many children need to die in the name of these pathologically driven, toxic, patriarchally animated, I would call them toxic or evil narratives. And we've all seen in more recent time the lies that have been perpetuated in the name of Big Pharma and the faux gene therapy called an inoculation or a so-called vaccine. I'm a believer in vaccines. But right now, 1984 is alive and well globally, and many of you know that George Orwell was a British policeman in, of all countries, Myanmar, in Burma. He wrote the book Burma Days before he wrote the book, you know, the international classic now that's become more active, more important as a type of Bible to understand the nature of misinformation and Big Sister and Big Brother and lies and manipulation of the media and manipulation of consciousness to, as Noam Chomsky, the great linguist, to manufacture consent, to hijack one's own conscience and dignity and do things that you would never dream doing because your mind has been corroded with misinformation and propaganda, and you now are indoctrinated and you call it truth, you call it freedom, you call it radical revolutionary politics. You can call it anything that you want, but you're not in control of your own faculties, your own ethics, your own mind, your own moral wisdom, your own courage, your own freedom. You're a puppet, a cognitive, digitally manipulated puppet. And what's new, right? George Orwell had the good fortune to write this amazing book, but he was a colonialist. He was an occupier. Burma was occupied for nearly 120 some years, up until I think 1947, when, based upon World War II and Aung San Suu Kyi's father, General Aung San, fought first with the Japanese invaders and then changed and switched alliances to the British and the Americans, the Allied forces that bombed the Japanese and decimated the Burmese culture. I went to Burma in 1977. I was driven by this quest to understand consciousness. I read a book by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw called Basic Instructions on Insight or Vipassana Meditation. And the pragmatism of that, the wisdom of that, to know your own mind based upon courageous, disciplined, mindfully intelligent, applied presence at the sense faculties and study the nature of cognition and ideation and the movement of what we call in classical Dhamma or Abhidhamma, Buddhist psychology, as cetasikas, mind states, nearly invisible frequencies of consciousness, analogous to colors on a palette or sound frequencies in music, but they're discernible dance steps, discernible ontologies, discernible phrases that can be understood through the felt mindful knowing of them in present time presence. And therein lies meditation, and that's what drew me to Burma. And Mahasi Sayadaw, whom I asked way back in the day in 1977 when a group of us went to Burma to meet with him, and I asked him, "Sir, can I ordain and become a Buddhist monk to practice this timeless teaching of Satipatthana and Vipassana?" And he told me, which was very foreign to me at the time, that the country is now that we've been given independence, that we fought for it, World War II decimated our cities, on and on and on, but we're ruled by dictatorship. In Burma, post-World War II, a succession of patriarchal, dictatorial progressively more and more violent, men in authoritarian, autocratic, dictatorial, totalitarian, big brother-like power matrices, consumed with their own mana or their pride or their violent narcissism, their toxic ego, call it what you will, where human minds are captivated by evil, and they mistake good for evil, and they mistake evil for good. And we have examples all throughout history. Some of the most classic are Adolf Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini. Look at my own country of America under Nixon and Johnson, and the progressive war machine of the American government, the great American freedom that we have to sing and to dance and to make love and to go to school, co-opted by this preoccupation with the industrialization of violence, denigration, and murder, and the manipulation of concepts to therefore hijack American taxpayers' money and their own mind to agree to finance what President Biden has become known for, the forever wars president, the forever wars politician. Privilege and profit and power over moral integrity, over true sacred reciprocity, over unity, over peace, over the essence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that all women, all men are born equal in dignity and in conscience. And these inalienable freedoms of speech, of consciousness, of expression, of assembly, of religion, irregardless of financial status, of education, they're intrinsic. And how we lose the plot. And Burma for me is not just because of my lineage to the family of Burma and the ethnicities, not just the Burmese Buddhist. I've traveled the country. Back in the day I could speak the language quite well. I've been to all the various states of the country. It's the size of Texas or France, I think of Germany. It's got 55 million people. As I said before, there's I think 13 or 14 major regions. So when I speak of Burma and I use the word Dhamma, it's not just that I'm a Burmese Buddhist that I'm connected to. My mother and her parents, my grandparents, came to America as immigrants from Lebanon, from Canaan. The family name was Canaan. My grandmother had 7 sisters. She had 7 daughters. I was one of 25 grandchildren. And that's my lineage from my mother's side, from Lebanon, and from, I think we have record of 6 or 7 generations from Damascus in Syria, where I have my deep embedded Christian mystical values. You know, many of you know and some don't. I don't lead with it as anything other than that's true for me, that you know, back in high school, I was the president in my senior year, although I was doing a lot of athletics and a lot of psychedelic experimentation and adventure. I was the president of the Young Christian Society. I had a deep feeling of the divinity of life. I had a deep feeling of the entheogenic nature of consciousness, regardless of the psychedelic or entheogens. And then when I got turned on to the entheogen and primarily to DSL, LSD, SLD, SDL, whatever it was, that acronym that led to mind-enhancing experiences, it went, wow, this is very deeply rooted into how I was brought up as a child with my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and my brothers and sisters in the family unit. My dad, also from Boston. And I was born in Boston, and my dad's parents came from Nova Scotia, where there's a deep genealogy. I think 5, 6, or 7 generations from Nova Scotia. We have an island named after our family, Clements Island off the coast of Nova Scotia, and prior to that was Ireland. And I bring this up because we're all interconnected in this existential family tree without beginning called life, not just human life, the animals, the trees, the butterflies, the flowers, the lizards, the snakes, the indigenous people in different dimensions, the metaverse, the intersecting nature of consciousness in different dimensions. Burma drew me to that exploration. It was a mystical adventure that many people do not know because they hear the word mindfulness and they think of just bare attention and being present for the efficacy of bare attention, of noticing what's happening in the moment. But Burma is a radically trans-Rumi-esque, like Tibet, a very deeply mystical illuminating of different dimensions of consciousness. And I went there to study meditation in a way from the early days of looking for alternatives to the psychedelic, to the entheogen. I had explored up until about 25 or 26 when I went to Burma, but I wanted something that was organic, that I could, enter consciousness consciously and mindfully begin to analogously occupy different states, therefore in harmony, and develop harmonic frequencies that led towards the radiance of what we call in Buddhist psychology of jnana, or insight into phenomenology. And then you begin to craft your own collage, your own mandala, your own chosen states of liberating consciousness for the purpose of freeing oneself from self-generated dukkha or suffering. And that's what I loved about the Buddha's teaching. It wasn't Buddhism. It was like, hey, come and see for yourself, young man. There's a timeless teaching of knowing how to inhabit consciousness consciously. And that's the beauty of Abhidhamma or Dhamma or Dharma in the Sanskrit word, but as a Buddhist term, Dhamma and Abhidhamma is experiential presence to learn the attributes of this invisibility of knowing, this consciousness in context to consciousness, to states of mind, to the phenomenology of the senses embodied. Many of you know when you do a psychedelic, whatever the dose, consciousness is revealed. Next thing you know, you go from 2% of presence to about 20 or 30%. And if what you do there is to begin to feel, look, see, and know that which is happening, and to look with discerning patience on how it's behaving, you begin to awaken to classical jnana, which is insight that moves into panya or wisdom, of these three very profound concepts that define why Dhamma is precious to me: anicca, anatta, and dukkha. Anicca, impermanence. There's nothing that can be held. Everything is a photonic bubble on top of an infinite ocean of photonic frequencies of infinite conditions of impermanence. When I was walking the beach for nearly a year on Maui, doing my first iteration of psilocybin with legally being prescribed moderate to small doses of ketamine spray and also of LSD, I would walk barefoot, I would walk without a shirt, I would wear my shorts and go deep into forests and nature, and I would begin to feel the vibrational frequency of anicca. And I would look out at the ocean and the rainbows and the microclimates and the birds and the turtles, and I would imagine this great expanse of water with all the sea creatures and all the molecules, all the waves, and the waves were just moving across this infinite expanse. And yet there was no wave that was moving from way over there in Japan across the ocean all the way to the Hawaiian Islands. It was conditions moving conditions to give rise to the idea of a wave, but the wave would just sink as the conditions, but the energy of momentum touching conditions. There is no intrinsic fire with wood and oxygen and air. Fire ignites. Conditions, anatta. Existence is a conditioned phenomena. Remove this condition and that ceases. If you understand the conditioned nature, as I was instructed in Burma by my teachers, you will understand that it is only through conditioned, blind allegiance to what's known as kilesa, a beautiful word, states of mind that by function contract consciousness, narrow it. Anger narrows it and begins to project what appears to be a blame, judgment, violation through the I and through ideation on the outside. When you mindfully begin to see, many of you know, and intelligently occupy the kilesa of dosa, you begin to reclaim the ideation that gives the appearance that it's outside. You begin to see the Vedana inside, the unpleasant association associated with the idea. You feel the anger and you begin to be mindfully intelligent of the anger, unpleasant Vedana, thinking, blaming, judgment, breathing, back to the breath. All of a sudden the dosa in the Vedana, anicca, anatta. And the dukkha is like, wow, disappeared into what's known as sukha, or trans dukkha, trans sukha, neutrality. And you go, wow, I can, figuratively speaking, architect my own liberation in context to whatever the conditions are inside and whatever the conditions are outside. Mind you, they're more and more complex, which I'm going to get into in this last phase of the talk, the revolution. But you go, wow, the non-pathological model of awakening to freedom. It's like everything is an opportunity to insert, if one has the conditioned developmental instinct, to cultivate these factors, what we call of awakening Dhamma or awakening freedom, patience, determination, concentration, calm, mindful awareness, energy. You begin to have the courage to feel what we call responsibly reclaiming the ideation of blame, judgment, externalization, projection onto what appears to be exteriority. And you go, wow, how cool is that to, as quickly as possible, come home to beingness. And as I was encouraged, to feel the nature of that which is present. Basic Dhamma 101. To feel, the moral courage to feel. Many of you know, but I'll say it again here on the eve of launching our worldwide global campaign, use yourfreedom.org to free Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Peace Laureate, given a life sentence in solitary confinement, and the President Win Myint, nearly close to 100 unlawfully elected democratic leaders, along with 19,900 prisoners of conscience, girls and boys, elders, children, at this point in the Burma's gulags, suffering routinely from arbitrary starvation, torture, humiliation, beatings, and rapes, largely unnoticed in the world. And yet the people of Burma, the 132 ethnicities, primarily in the regional context of Karenni State, of Rakhine State, of Mon State, of Karen State, of Shan State, the Sagaing regions, all throughout the country, the people, the young boys and girls, the civil servants, the teachers, the professors, sometimes the high school students, sometimes the elementary school students, rising up in revolutionary moral courage and saying, no, this is a rad generation of X and Z and millennial. And a lot of the women, young women, are putting on the camouflage uniforms and taking up the revolutionary fight because they have the moral dignity and the conscience that they refuse to live and cower under military-driven, violent toxicity and domination called dictatorship. And I might add, funded by a lot of big tycoons that are evading the sanctions and Singaporean banks. I was just in Singapore and I was convulsing with nausea at some of the Burmese tycoons with these mega mansions in Singapore and other people colluding with Burma's dictatorship because of loot and money and tyranny and privilege and blah, 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 blah. But if you put these men and women in a prison camp for a minute, they would beg and give away all of their money to get out of that torture. But Burma is supported and propped up by, for whatever reason, Putin's needing to supply technology, maintenance, drones, missiles, helicopters, and jets to one of this era's most evil dictators the world has ever known. I don't like to vilify him, but his actions and the people close to him, including his families, their actions are so heinous. You can barely read the news every day of what these men in uniform and power, false power, do to inflict horror upon their own people. Recently, they even mandated a conscription, mandatory conscription in Burma, bringing millions of girls and boys from 18 to 35 or so, where you must join the dictatorship. You must become a Nazi, or you will be persecuted, you will be arrested, you'll be tortured, your family will lose their money, their home, and the Thai embassy, I'm reading, is just overrun with people trying to get passports to leave. The border from Mae Hong Son to Mae Sot is just inundated with boys and girls trying to leave for fear of being forced into trainings, vicious trainings, to attempt to indoctrinate them into dehumanizing their own brothers and sisters and their parents in the name of this evil intoxication. It's just mind-blowing what we're seeing there, but we can make a difference. The useyourfreedom.org campaign is about to launch. And if you want to belong to this campaign, just do a search. You could offer a donation. You can sign up for any number of the 10 different call to actions that we're offering. You can download the book that we're offering freely, The Voice of Hope, Aung San Suu Kyi from Prison, A Letter to a Dictator. And my colleague and I, Fergus, we've invited the dictator. Invite us to your capital, in your mansion with the team of people around you, and just promise that you'll protect us and we'd like to bring your narrative to the people of your country, unedited, and we'd like to do recently what Tucker Carlson did in interviewing Mr. Putin in Russia, in Moscow. We'd like to interview you on international radio, television, and just explain, why are you attempting a genocide of democracy and human rights and decency and Dhamma and religion in your country? What are you drunk on? What are you drugged on? Is it that you have read a book on trauma and you're realizing that because of 121 years of white supremacist occupation of your country, you're experiencing unprocessed generational trauma that only you and your colleagues are now beginning to understand, and you look upon the revolutionaries and Aung San Suu Kyi, having studied at Oxford, having married a Brit, that somehow you see her as the equivalent of the president of Israel, Netanyahu, possibly of having married a Nazi German? Is that what you're trying to do? Justify mass murder, justify mass incarceration, justify the decimation of a validly elected democratic government that, through your bogus narrative that it was false and manipulated, who are you appealing to? Your wife doesn't believe you, your kids don't believe you, your colleagues don't believe you. No one believes you except that you're being used by Xi Jinping, you're being used by Putin, because they make money off of your evil and they want to own your country. They want a slave state. Burma is the next Tibet. Been saying this for the last 10 years, tragically. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said many decades ago, if we do not save Tibet in the next few years, there'll be no Tibet to save. And imagine right now, I want to pause here and just kind of not be seen as some kind of fanatic, but Burma, and paying tribute to Burma, is the latest birth of democracy in the world. I don't know about you, but my friend Aung San Suu Kyi and all of her top 100, top 500 colleagues, girls and boys, and I've done books with them over the years. I was meditators with them. I was friends with them. I'm friends with her late husband, with her co-leaders, U Tien U, U Ti Mung, U Win Tin, U Win Tain, U A Mung, on so many of them. They validated and empowered non-violent, feminine-inspired, not because she's a woman, because of the timeless quality of sacred reciprocity. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. It's a trans-Buddhist, a multi-faith revolution. And we've documented this in numerous books. Aung San Suu Kyi from prison, The Voice of Hope in 1995, with my 6 months with her and her colleagues. 4-volume set, Burma's Voices of Freedom. Wisdom for the World, her teacher and I did a book of conversations. He outlined the requisites of reconciliation, which was the blueprint that she used when she was released from her 3rd incarceration in 2010. And I was blessed to meet her in San Francisco shortly thereafter when she was awarded the Václav Havel Award for Creative Dissent. And I want to really suggest to people, what does creative dissent look like today? Therein lies, each of us are artists of freedom. Each of us control the narrative of our liberation. That's Dhamma, it's not Buddhism. That's another false narrative. The Dalai Lama is, I've met the Dalai Lama several times. I can't speak for him, obviously, but I've been blessed to have a foreword done by him in 2 separate books, endorsements by him. And the irony of Buddhism, it's not a religion. I know it's very hard to get your head around that. Psychedelics are not a religion. There's a renaissance. They're organic. Mushrooms don't belong to Americans or Brits or Swedish. LSD doesn't belong to Iranians, or is that Switzerland or somewhere. These are organic substances. The Buddha, prior to him being a Buddha, which just simply means a being dedicated to awakening, right? We've got 10,000 of people in Ubud dedicated to awakening. They don't all walk around as Shivnu and Vishnu or Buddha. But my point is like Burma is a revolutionary culture. It's merging the range of the palette of religions. I've met all of the Islamic leaders in Burma. They're in our book, Burma's Voices of Freedom. I've interviewed them. I've met the Catholics. Brilliant revolutionaries. I've met the Christians. I've met the Jews. It's nothing special. I'm a believer of entering direct experience to understand what motivates someone. I've met dictators. I was given a visa to Burma by the man that imprisoned Aung San Suu Kyi and my best friend, U Tien U, and my mentor, U Chi Mung. It's a family. We all go off the rails at times. In Burma, they said reconciliation over domination. Whoa, man. I could be sure if Aung San Suu Kyi were free today, she would volunteer and fly to Rafah, do all that she could to speak with Netanyahu in Jerusalem and the war cabinet, and do all that she could to walk in to Gaza. I wouldn't be surprised, as His Holiness probably wanted to and hasn't made the point publicly because of don't make a deal of this, or Pope Francis, or any of the other religious leaders and philosophers and mindfulness people around the world. You know, Gandhi walked to the sea and said, stop work. We don't have to support the war machine. Millions of people around the world are occupying urban settings. We don't have to support the war machine. We don't have to support viral genocide anywhere in the world. We don't have to support propaganda. We are many, as Arundhati Roy has said. They are few. Yes, they own legacy media, but they have a lot of employees there that would walk out of that job. Be sure of it. If Mr. Musk would just put into a fund, along with some of the other tech titans, a fund to support civil disobedience, walking off your job from the New York Times, walking off from the Washington Post, walking off your job from CNN. Compete with Big Pharma's money profiteering advertising in these big legacy corporate media. Hey, Mr. Gates, and I'm not calling you out, Mr. Musk, but put some of those billions and millions that you make every hour into a fund to give people a chance to breathe and to live without having to be a running dog and work for America and the West's Fourth Reich. Enough. Walk out. I'm nauseous to pay money to kill people. I'm a proxy murderer. But in Burma, they chose for 35 years to say, hey, okay, we'll fill the prisons filled. They did a Martin Luther King. They filled the prison. They're filled right now. And how much can you take? I don't judge the people of Burma, the boys and girls all around the country, in their radical right to defend themselves and their family. I would be right in there, But I'm an outsider. I'm an American. I'm using my voice first and foremost. And I'm not trying to vilify anyone, but it's like Burma's important. And it's not just because it's a small nation of 50 million people way over there, nestled, south of Yunnan province, with that big 1,200-mile oil pipeline going from Burma, from China to Burma. Imagine this, right out there into that Bay of Bengal, off the coast of Rakhine State. And people wonder, why did all of this stuff go down in Rakhine State where the people were sacrificed? And now you can't even go there. Loot, oil, blood money, gas and oil. Why? The locomotive of I don't vilify the Chinese people. I love the people of China, the 1.3 billion people of China, but it's under that firewall of communist, dictatorial, oppressive, no regard for human rights, where forget about the 3,000 boys and girls in Hong Kong, where 3,000 Aung San Suu Kyi's, 3,000 Nelson Mandela's, 3,000 plus their 10,000 family members disappeared, imprisoned, tortured, or murdered. And hello, Hong Kong, the next Tibet, gone. Burma, the next Hong Kong, Tibet, gone. How many more dominoes in the puzzle of this Belt and Road bullshit initiative, which is a synonym for totalitarian oppression? Burma is a slave state. They want to harness the people of Burma like livestock, to put them into organic algorithms of AI, where all they do is sew, create plastics, assemble parts, until AI takes over Burma, and then they're starved to death, killed to death, or just left to rot in their fifth, sixth world huts, starved to death. Burma will undergo a genocide, whether it's violent, political, oppressive, the absence of food and medicines, or of hope, and perhaps much of the world. I'm not a pessimist, but Burma is important, and there's 20,000 prisoners of conscience in the gulags in Burma. I don't know how many are in the gulags of Tibet. I mean, the Dalai Lama and the people in Dharamsala and around the world are among the chosen ones who are not under the Chinese occupation in the Tibetan plateau. That's a whole other order of hell. And I'm going to invite you to check out our campaign, useyourfreedom.org. If nothing else, download the books and share it on all media, repeatedly, on X, Twitter, on Getter, on Threads, on Instagram, on Facebook. Volunteer your services. Enlist with your photograph and a statement on why Burma is important, why freedom is important to you in your life, why human rights are important to you. And let us rise up together more and more in our fragile, ethical, revolutionary, trans-Buddhistic Dharma, world Dharma courage, and use more and more of our voice, our conscience, our artistry, our poetry, our hands, one person at a time. What I love about Burma and many of the people that I've met there is that they empower deep, to use the phrase that was pretty much brought to the world by the late Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, deep listening, but it's not a Vietnamese Buddhist concept. Any of you know who've practiced or embodies mindful, intelligent presence knows that it requires, I would call it feminine and deep and inclusive, reverential, all are synonyms for me. Deep is a little bit too masculine. It's got too much down like a deep well, you know what I mean? It's like, I would call it more of intrinsic, intuitive, open-hearted, reciprocal listening that restrains bias, restrains impatience, restrains that preoccupation with making sense, that just relaxes kilesa and empowers radiant states of mind. So let me close today. I was going to give a talk today on a very favorite topic on the attributes, the 7 attributes of a non-pathological awakening. And this is not some indirect way of criticizing the global healing religion or healing psychologies or the trauma economy. But it's, you know, you've heard of the word bodhisattva, and we immediately think of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We think of the feminine-inspired Kuan Yin model. The Pali equivalent of bodhisattva is bodhisatta, a being, satta, being, bodhi, wisdom. And it's implicit in the word bodhi that it's experiential, it's human, it's natural. It's unique to the confluence of consciousness in context to your senses, to the good, the true, and the beautiful. So you're a being dedicated to freedom, dignity, and conscience, your own and others simultaneously. And so, oh wow, a bodhisattva is a being, and the more immediately we can embody bodhisattva chitta, rigpa, in the wisdom of beingness, courageous wisdom in beingness. I would call it pre-warriorness. Warrior is a little bit too much for me because it implies a little bit too much armor and spears and sticks and swords and guns. I'm not a warrior. I'm a human being, vulnerable, poised, crazy, mad, awake. I wanted to say sexual, but I don't know anymore. But I'm definitely erotic in the sense of I like the adventure of being human, although at the ground of this invenerating madness is crazy. But we've got to do something about it, right? And how can I embody other as family, as lover, as mother, as brother, which the Dalai Lama encourages us. See everyone as family, which begs us to be more empathetic. Burma's revolution is about empathy, about compassion, about loving kindness in action. Aung San Suu Kyi invented those words, metta in action. In our book, The Voice of Hope, compassion in action. These were her phrases. Do what you can to acquaint yourself with why Burma is important. It's not about a country or about so many diverse ethnicities or about revolution alone, but it's about Dhamma. I would call it world Dhamma, a world beyond religion, a freedom beyond ism, beyond philosophy. And it's like breaking bread with family. When I went to Burma, it was like, whoa, I'd never seen a culture that so embodied a pre-mindfulness concept, which was to take refuge. Let me just say that word, doesn't it? Take refuge in the innate sanctity of your moral compass. Dignity, right? Dignity has intrinsic pure motive embedded in that cognitive soil. You don't have to work on it, you just have to relax into it, Alan. That's what meditation was in Burma, was relax more into intrinsic nature. Bodhicitta, bodhisattva. Intrinsic, you've got the power, dude. Break the habit of your blindness or allegiance to the orthodoxy of your fear, shame, blame, and you call it right. Evil as good, good as evil, dictatorship, totalitarianism, okay? And so, wow. When I was really ill, I had typhoid and hepatitis, and I was recovering from an operation that didn't go well, and my body was very infected. I couldn't move and talk very well, and my Kalyanamita, Seda U Pandita, who was the heir to the monastery after Mahasi died, he invited a group of his followers to take care of me. And they came to my room, because I didn't want to be in the hospital. They converted my room into a hospital room in the Mahasi Ekta, just to talk about why Burma is important to me, this refuge in dana, generosity, this refuge in moral integrity, this refuge in bhavana, or the beautification of consciousness. And these men and women would hang out on the floor of my room. I was a monk lying pretty much unconscious with an IV and really high fevers and yellow from hepatitis and infections. And I don't want to get too melodramatic, but I couldn't bathe and I couldn't eat on my own. And so I was taken to the washroom and bathed and answering the call of nature, which is really rad to have other people do that with you and for you. And to wipe with a damp cloth your boiling forehead and face, and to put moisture on your lips, to wipe sometimes your tears because of their grace, their beauty. I was afraid of my beauty. The beauty of the Dhamma, the beauty of my intrinsic purity. I was conditioned. We're all conditioned. And these people, unknown to me, couldn't even talk with them, couldn't even go, thank you. Did what they felt that they needed to do because of taking refuge in intrinsic love of generosity as a refuge of nutrition for their own consciousness. That's it. And took refuge in moral integrity, took refuge in the littlest acts of caring. And it's hard to get a family member to do that sometimes. It's hard to get a paid assistant to do that. These people, by function, by nature, birth. Yes, there's all ranges of people in Burma. It's got a violent dictatorship and a lot of people that support it. But by and large, these people are amazing. And I can only invite you to read our books, look at our films, reach out, whatever I can do personally to be on podcast or in the media with my colleague Fergus, who's an expert on Burma, an expert on the Rohingya crisis especially. These are family, these are friends. It's not a political act alone. And look at our campaign, useyourfreedom.org, and do what you can to spread the news. And this is why Burma is important to me. I could go on, and maybe next week I'll give more of a talk. And from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being in my life. And thank you for listening with the patience and grace of being a fellow brother and sister, struggling and knowing that we have the power if we so choose to embody our own Dhamma, Sila, Bhavana, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami, take refuge in your own awakening, right? Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, take refuge in your own intrinsic wisdom to engage mind for the luminosity of freedom. And Buddhang Saranam, Sanghang Saranam Gacchami, take refuge in the community of humans and animals and trees. We all care. We all don't want to be unhappy. We all don't want to suffer. Xi Jinping doesn't want to suffer. Putin doesn't want to suffer. President Biden doesn't want to suffer. Former President Trump doesn't want to suffer. The prisoners in Burma don't want to suffer. We have that common heritage. That's a Dhamma that we must understand to evoke our empathy and caring and reconciliation. Guns are not going to work. Drones aren't going to work. We can't kill off ignorance, but we can do unto others as we wish to be cared for in ourselves. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Have a beautiful day.